The garden party was already unbearable before Lady Cordelia Ashworth opened her mouth. Eleanor Kirby had been standing near the fountain, trying to look interested in a conversation about roses while her mind catalogued escape routes. The afternoon sun felt too bright, the laughter too loud. Every instinct told her this had been a mistake, accepting Lady Pembroke's invitation, coming alone, pretending she belonged among women whose biggest concern was whether their gloves matched their parasols. She should have trusted her instincts. "There she is!" Cordelia's voice cut through the chatter like glass breaking. The devoted daughter. The garden went quiet in that horrible anticipatory way that meant someone was about to be eviscerated for entertainment. Eleanor turned slowly. Lady Cordelia Ashworth stood 10 paces away, resplendent in pale blue silk that matched her cold eyes. 3 other women flanked her: Lady Stanhope, Mrs. Winters, and someone Eleanor didn't recognize. All wore the same expression of barely concealed anticipation. "Lady Cordelia," Eleanor kept her voice steady, "how lovely to see you." "Is it?" Cordelia's smile was sharp. "I wonder if my nephew would have found it lovely to see you. Before you killed him, I mean." The words landed like a slap. Eleanor felt the familiar tightening in her chest, the warning that came before everything went wrong. Her fingers curled against her skirts. "I never—" "Your father prescribed the medication that stopped his heart." Cordelia took a step forward. Around them, other guests were turning, drawn by the scent of scandal. "Christopher was 5 years old. He trusted your father. We all did." Eleanor's vision was starting to narrow at the edges. Not here. Not now. She forced herself to breathe slowly through her nose. "My father would never—" "Your father was a drunk who couldn't tell belladonna from chamomile." Another step. Cordelia's voice rose, performing for the growing audience. "And when he realized what he'd done, when the guilt became too much, he took the coward's way out and left you to inherit everything. Very convenient, wasn't it?" The chest pain was spreading. Eleanor could feel her eyelids growing heavy, the involuntary response that had plagued her since childhood. When the fear became too much, her body simply refused to see, refused to stay present, refused to fight. She was losing the battle to keep her eyes open when a new voice interrupted. "Forgive me, Lady Cordelia, but I'm afraid you're blocking my view of the clouds." The voice was male, aristocratic, and deeply amused by something. Eleanor forced her eyes open, commanded them to obey, and saw a tall figure stepping between her and Cordelia, the Duke of Carlisle. She'd seen him twice before at a distance, always on the periphery of social events, usually looking bored or staring at the sky. He was doing both now. "Your Grace." Cordelia's tone shifted, uncertain. "I wasn't aware you were attending. I wasn't aware I needed your permission." He tilted his head, studying the sky above Cordelia's elaborate coiffure with apparent fascination. "There's a rather remarkable formation of cumulus clouds developing, and your position directly in my line of sight. Terribly inconsiderate." Someone laughed nervously. Cordelia's face flushed. "Perhaps your Grace didn't hear what I was saying." "Oh, I heard." His gaze finally dropped to her, and Eleanor saw his eyes were an unusual shade of amber. Something about belladonna and chamomile. "Fascinating that you know so much about toxic substances, given that most ladies of quality wouldn't recognize either plant if it was served at tea. Makes one wonder how you acquired such specialized knowledge." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Cordelia's flush deepened to crimson. "How dare you suggest—" "I didn't suggest anything. I simply observed." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Observation is rather a specialty of mine. For instance, I observe that you're still blocking my view, and that this entire conversation is preventing Miss Kirby from enjoying Lady Pembroke's excellent lemonade, and that your nephew, poor child, was treated by at least 3 physicians before his death, not just one rural doctor. All quite observable if one bothers to look." He turned then, dismissing Cordelia entirely, and offered Eleanor his arm. "Miss Kirby, would you care to walk with me? I believe there's a better vantage point near the East Terrace for observing the weather." Eleanor's chest still felt tight, her hands still trembled, but the crushing weight had eased. She could breathe, she could see. She placed her hand on his arm, feeling the solid warmth of him through the fabric of his coat. "I would be honored, Your Grace." They walked away together, leaving Cordelia standing speechless among the roses. Eleanor didn't look back, but she heard the whispers starting, speculation and scandal and shock that the Duke of Carlisle had publicly defended someone so far beneath his station. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly when they were out of earshot. "Do what?" "Intervene, defend me, risk your reputation by associating with 'I didn't defend you.'" He sounded genuinely puzzled. "I defended my ability to watch clouds in peace. You were simply in the vicinity." He glanced at her. "Also, Lady Cordelia is tedious, and I enjoy making tedious people uncomfortable. It's one of my few pleasures." Despite everything, the humiliation, the fear, the trembling in her hands, Eleanor almost laughed. "You're very kind." "I'm not kind at all. I'm self-interested and easily bored." They reached the terrace and he released her arm, immediately turning his attention to the sky. "Look there. See how the edges are darkening? We'll have rain before sunset. Heavy rain, I suspect." Eleanor followed his gaze. The clouds were indeed darkening, their white peaks turning grey. You can tell that just by looking. One can tell a great deal by looking if one pays attention. He pulled a small leather notebook from his coat pocket and made a notation. Most people don't pay attention. They're too busy concerning themselves with who wore what to which ball and who was seen speaking to whom. Exhausting way to live. And you concern yourself with clouds. Among other things. He glanced at her again, and this time his expression was more serious. "You were about to faint back there, or something like it." It wasn't a question. Eleanor's throat tightened. "I have episodes. When I become overwhelmed." "What kind of episodes?" No one had ever asked so directly. Most people either pretended not to notice or whispered about hysteria and feminine weakness behind her back. "I close my eyes. I can't help it. It's as if my mind decides it would rather not see what's happening and simply refuses." He considered this, still looking at her with that same analytical attention he'd given the clouds. "Interesting. Most people find it disturbing. Most people are idiots." He tucked his notebook away. "The human body is remarkably intelligent. If your mind believes closing your eyes will protect you, then it's doing exactly what it should. Survival mechanism." Eleanor stared at him. In 3 years of society dismissing her episodes as theatrics or madness, no one had ever called them intelligent. "However," he continued, "it does leave you rather vulnerable when people like Lady Cordelia are shouting at you in gardens. Have you considered simply hitting people who upset you? I find it more effective than fainting." This time she did laugh, though it came out shaky. "I don't think ladies are supposed to hit people. Ladies aren't supposed to do a great many things, yet here we are." He offered his arm again. "Come, the rain will start soon, and you look as though you could use somewhere quiet to recover before you have to face that mob again." She should refuse. Should thank him politely and make her excuses and never see him again. Getting close to a duke, especially one as peculiar as Carlisle, would only invite more scandal, more speculation, more attacks like Cordelia's. But her hands were still shaking, and the thought of walking back through that garden alone made her chest tighten again. "Thank you," she whispered, and took his arm. They walked in silence toward the house. Eleanor was intensely aware of the whispers following them, the eyes tracking their progress. The Duke seemed oblivious, or perhaps simply unconcerned. He was humming something under his breath, some melody she didn't recognize. "Your Grace," she said quietly, "why did you really help me?" He was quiet for several steps. When he finally answered, his voice had lost its amused edge. "Because I know what it's like to be blamed for something you couldn't control, and because Lady Cordelia's certainty annoyed me." Certainty usually means someone has stopped thinking. Before Eleanor could respond, Lady Pembroke herself appeared at the terrace doors, looking flustered. Your Grace, Miss Kirby, I do apologize for that unpleasantness." "No need to apologize, Lady Pembroke. Your roses are excellent, your lemonade is adequate, and your guest list is delightfully volatile." He released Eleanor's arm and bowed. "Miss Kirby, thank you for the conversation. I hope we meet again under less dramatic circumstances." He strode away before Eleanor could respond, leaving her standing with their hostess. who looked torn between mortification and excitement at having witnessed such a scene. "Well," Lady Pembroke said faintly, "the Duke has never spoken to anyone at my parties before. Usually he just stands in corners and stares at the sky. You must have made quite an impression." Eleanor doubted that very much. She suspected the Duke would have intervened for anyone being publicly attacked, simply because conflict interested him more than clouds. But as she glanced back at the garden, at Cordelia's furious face and the speculation in every other guest's eyes, she couldn't help feeling grateful that someone, anyone, had stood between her and the accusation she'd been running from for 3 years. Her father was dead, her reputation was destroyed, and the inheritance everyone believed she'd killed for was nothing but a rundown clinic and a pile of debts. But for one moment, standing on Lady Pembroke's terrace with a strange duke who cared more about weather than scandal, Eleanor had been able to breathe. The rain started as she rode home in the hired carriage, heavy drops that turned the roads to mud and made the horses nervous. Eleanor watched it through the window, remembering the Duke's certainty. Heavy rain, he'd said. Before sunset. He'd been right. She wondered what else he might be right about. The letter arrived 3 days later, delivered by a footman in Carlisle livery. The letter arrived 3 days later, delivered by a footman in Carlisle livery who looked embarrassed to be knocking on the door of such a modest house. Eleanor opened it with trembling fingers. "Miss Kirby, I require your assistance with a matter of mutual benefit. My man of business informs me you inherited your father's medical practice and all associated records. I am conducting a study of patterns between weather conditions and various illnesses, a subject most physicians dismiss as superstition, but which I believe merits serious investigation. Your father kept detailed records spanning 20 years. I need access to those records. In exchange, I can provide access to aristocratic households whose members' illnesses are typically treated in London, but who might benefit from a skilled local physician. I can also provide influence with the medical board currently reviewing your father's license, a review which I understand is preventing you from accessing much of his estate. Additionally, I require someone to accompany me on weather observations during various conditions. Most people find this tedious. You struck me as someone who might find it less tedious than most social engagements. If you're interested, meet me at the old mill at the edge of your father's property tomorrow at 2 o'clock. There's a storm system approaching that I need to document. Bring sturdy shoes, and perhaps a coat." Carlisle Eleanor read it 3 times. Then she walked to her father's study, the room she'd been avoiding since his death, and stared at the cabinets full of patient records he'd kept so meticulously. She'd inherited everything: the clinic, the records, the debts, and the crushing weight of suspicion that followed her everywhere, the whispered accusations that she'd poisoned him to gain it all. The truth was worse than poison. The truth was that she'd found him in this very room, laudanum bottle empty beside him, a note clutched in his hands that she'd burned before anyone else could see it. "Forgive me," it had said. Just those 2 words, over and over, until his handwriting had become illegible. She'd protected him in death the way she couldn't in life. Let people think it was natural causes. Let them wonder. Let them suspect her if they must. But the medical board's review was strangling her. Without resolution, she couldn't access the funds from selling the practice, couldn't pay the remaining debts, couldn't move forward. And now the Duke of Carlisle, peculiar, intelligent, infuriating Duke of Carlisle, was offering her a way out, or a way deeper in. She wasn't sure which. Eleanor looked out the window at the darkening sky. Storm coming just as he'd said. The Duke was right about the weather. She wondered if he might be right about other things too. The mill was half collapsed, its water wheel frozen with rust and disuse. Eleanor arrived exactly at 2 o'clock, wearing her most practical dress and her father's old coat, which was too large but waterproof. The Duke was already there, standing at the edge of the mill pond with his notebook open, writing something with intense concentration. He'd dispensed with his formal coat and stood in shirt sleeves and waistcoat, apparently unconcerned that it had started to drizzle. "You came," he said without looking up. "You offered me access to the medical board. I offered you many things. Most women would have focused on the social access." He glanced at her finally. "Good. You wore practical clothes. The women I usually attempt to recruit for these observations show up in silk and complain about their hair. You've recruited women before? Twice, both times were disasters. One fainted when lightning struck nearby. The other spent the entire storm talking about a ball she'd attended the previous week. He closed his notebook. I have higher hopes for you. Because I'm already socially ruined? Because you asked intelligent questions about clouds? He gestured toward the sky. Tell me what you see. Eleanor looked up. The clouds were dark grey, moving fast, their edges ragged. A storm. Not just a storm. Look at the layers. See how some are moving east while others are moving north? That's called wind shear. It means the atmosphere is unstable, different air masses colliding. It's going to be violent. As if to punctuate his words, thunder rumbled in the distance. Now, he continued, tell me what you observe about your own body. Eleanor frowned. I'm cold. Besides temperature, she paid attention. My heart is beating faster. My hands feel clammy. Fear response. Your body recognizes danger and prepares to respond. He looked at her directly. What happens when that response becomes overwhelming? I close my eyes. Exactly. Which would be perfectly reasonable if a tiger were charging at you. Closing your eyes and playing dead might save your life. But in a social situation, it makes you vulnerable. He gestured around them. Out here, however, with just the storm and me, that response is unnecessary. Your body can recognize that the danger is minimal. You're trying to desensitize me. I'm trying to give you options. He opened his notebook again. I need you to time the lightning strikes, count the seconds between flash and thunder. It will give me distance calculations. Can you do that with your eyes open? It was such a simple challenge, such a straightforward task. Eleanor found herself nodding. Good. When you see the flash, start counting. When you hear the thunder, tell me the number. They stood together in the increasing drizzle, waiting. Eleanor was hyper-aware of him beside her, the focused way he watched the sky, the small movements of his pencil across paper, the complete lack of judgment in his posture. The first lightning strike lit the sky like a crack in the world. 1, Eleanor said. 2, 3, 4. Thunder crashed. 4 seconds. Excellent. Approximately 1 mile away. He wrote it down. Next one. They timed 6 strikes. 6 times Eleanor kept her eyes open, despite every instinct screaming at her to shut out the threat. 6 times she succeeded. Well done, the Duke said as the rain began in earnest. Your first successful storm observation. Is that what this was? Eleanor was soaked now, her hair plastered to her face, her father's coat heavy with water. An observation? Among other things, he closed his notebook and tucked it inside his waistcoat to protect it. I also wanted to see if you could work with me without fainting or gossiping. Congratulations, you passed both tests. I'm honored by your confidence. He grinned at her sarcasm. You should be. I'm notoriously difficult to please. He started walking toward the mill's overhang for shelter. Come, let's discuss our arrangement before we both drown. They stood under the rotting roof, rain drumming around them. Up close, Eleanor could see details she'd missed at the garden party. The small scar through his left eyebrow, the ink stains on his fingers, the way his hair curled when wet. I need systematic access to your father's records, he said. 20 years of patient data, organized by season, weather conditions, and diagnosis. In exchange, I'll use my influence to resolve the medical board's review. I'll also provide introductions to families who need a physician and aren't particular about gender. I'm not a physician. I assisted my father, but I have no formal training. Neither do most physicians. They simply have arrogance and a university degree. He leaned against the mill wall. You have practical experience and your father's records. That's worth more than Latin. Eleanor's throat tightened. Most people think my father's records are worthless, that he was incompetent. Most people are wrong. His voice gentled slightly. I've already done preliminary research, Miss Kirby. Your father's diagnostic accuracy was remarkable. His treatment protocols were ahead of contemporary practice. Whatever happened at the end, whatever tragedy Lady Cordelia is using to destroy you, it doesn't erase 20 years of excellent medicine. The words hit somewhere tender. Eleanor looked away, blinking against tears that had nothing to do with rain. You don't know what happened. I know that good physicians sometimes make terrible mistakes. I know that guilt can be more fatal than poison, and I know that you're being punished for something you didn't do." He paused. "Am I wrong?" "No," she whispered. "Then help me prove it. Help me show that your father's work had value, that his records contain patterns no one else has documented, that his death, however it happened, doesn't diminish everything he built." It was such a simple offer, such a practical arrangement. But Eleanor heard the deeper promise underneath. "I see you. I believe you. I'm willing to fight for you." No one had offered that in 3 years. "What do you need from me?" she asked. "Access to the records. Assistance organizing them by date and weather condition. Your presence during observations. I need someone to document while I measure." He smiled slightly. "And perhaps occasional conversation that isn't about gloves or gossip. That's all? That's everything." He held out his hand. "Do we have an agreement?" Eleanor looked at his hand. Scarred knuckles, ink-stained fingers, elegant despite the calluses. A hand that had defended her publicly and now offered partnership privately. She took it. "We have an agreement." His grip was firm, warm despite the rain. "Excellent. We start tomorrow. I'll come to the clinic at 10 o'clock. Prepare the records from March through May of last year. There was unusual rainfall that spring, and I want to see if there's a correlation with respiratory illnesses. You're very specific." "I'm very thorough." He released her hand but didn't step back. "One more thing, Miss Kirby. This partnership requires honesty. If you have one of your episodes while we're working, tell me. Don't hide it. Don't be ashamed. Just tell me, and we'll stop until you're ready to continue. You won't think I'm hysterical. I'll think your body is protecting itself the only way it knows how." He smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. "I've spent my entire life being called eccentric for caring about clouds. I'm not going to judge you for closing your eyes." The rain was falling harder now, turning the mill pond into a chaos of ripples. Lightning flashed again, closer this time, and Eleanor felt the familiar tightening in her chest. But this time, she didn't fight it. She simply observed it, the way the Duke observed storms. "Thank you," she said, "for this, for believing me." "I don't believe you." At her shocked expression, he clarified, "I don't need to believe you. I know you're telling the truth. There's a difference." Eleanor didn't understand the distinction, but something in her chest loosened anyway. They ran through the rain back toward the road where both their horses waited. By the time Eleanor mounted, she was thoroughly soaked, her hair a disaster, her father's coat impossibly heavy. But she was also smiling. The Duke noticed. "What's amusing?" "I just realized I survived an entire storm with my eyes open." His answering smile was bright as lightning. "Yes, you did." He rode away toward Carlisle House, leaving Eleanor alone in the rain, watching his figure disappear into the grey distance. For the first time since her father's death, she felt something besides grief and fear. She felt curiosity. She felt purpose. She felt seen. The Duke arrived at precisely 10 o'clock the next morning. Accompanied by 2 footmen carrying empty crates. Eleanor had been awake since dawn, organizing her father's records, trying to make sense of years of meticulous notation written in his increasingly shaky hand. "Miss Kirby." The Duke surveyed the clinic's main room, the examination table, the glass-fronted cabinet full of instruments, the desk piled with papers and ledgers. "Impressive. How many patients did your father treat annually?" "Nearly 300. More during epidemic years. And he documented every case, every single one." Eleanor gestured toward the cabinets lining the walls. "Symptoms, treatments, outcomes. Weather conditions on the day they fell ill. Diet, living conditions. Everything he could observe." The Duke's expression transformed into something almost reverent. "This is extraordinary. This is—" He strode to the nearest cabinet and pulled out a ledger at random, flipping through pages covered in her father's careful writing. "This is exactly what I need." For the next hour they worked in focused silence. Eleanor pulled records while the Duke organized them into categories: respiratory, digestive, fever, injury. The footman carried crates back and forth to the Duke's carriage, removing records to be copied at Carlisle House. "You'll have them back within a fortnight," the Duke said. I've hired 3 clerks to make duplicates. Your father's originals won't leave my study. You're having them copied. Of course, I'm eccentric, not criminal. He was reading a case study from 5 years ago, his brow furrowed. Your father was documenting a connection between barometric pressure and joint pain. Look here, he notes that patients with old injuries consistently reported increased pain 12 hours before storms. He was seeing patterns no one else was looking for. Eleanor moved to read over his shoulder. The page detailed an elderly farmer whose shoulder, broken 20 years earlier, would ache before weather changes. Her father had documented 50 separate incidents, each with precise timing and atmospheric conditions. He used to say the patients knew more than the physicians, Eleanor said softly, that we should listen to their bodies. He was right. The Duke set the ledger aside carefully. Most physicians dictate to patients. Your father learned from them. They continued working until nearly noon, when Eleanor realized she hadn't eaten since yesterday. The Duke noticed her slight sway and immediately called for a break. There's an inn nearby, he said. Unless you're concerned about being seen with me. I think that concern became irrelevant at Lady Pembroke's garden party. Fair point. He offered his arm with exaggerated formality. Miss Kirby, would you do me the honor of sharing a meal while we discuss weather patterns and social ruin? She laughed despite herself. You make it sound so appealing. I'm told I have a gift for making things sound either more or less appealing than they are. I've never determined which. The inn was quiet at this hour, and the proprietor, an older woman named Mrs. Davies, who had been one of her father's patients, greeted Eleanor warmly and eyed the Duke with undisguised curiosity. They sat in a corner booth, and the Duke ordered enough food for 4 people. I wasn't sure what you'd prefer, he said at Eleanor's expression, so I ordered everything. Do you always make decisions this way? When I'm uncertain, yes. Thorough experimentation is the foundation of scientific method. He leaned back, studying her. Tell me about your father. Not the physician, the person. Eleanor tensed. Why? Because I'm about to spend significant time studying his work. I'd like to understand the mind behind it. It was such a reasonable request, such a clinical reason. But Eleanor felt the familiar tightening in her chest anyway. He was complicated. Most interesting people are. He was brilliant, patient, kind to people who couldn't pay him. She paused. He was also haunted by every patient he couldn't save, every mistake, every limitation of his knowledge. That's what made him good. That's what killed him. The words came out sharper than intended. The Duke was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was gentler than she'd heard before. Did he take his own life? Eleanor's hands clenched beneath the table. Yes. And you found him? Yes. And you've been protecting his reputation ever since, even though it's destroying yours. She looked up sharply. How did you? Because I would do the same thing. He met her eyes directly. My younger brother drowned when he was 12. I was supposed to be watching him. I was 15 and I was watching clouds instead, tracking a storm system moving across the lake. By the time I noticed he'd gone swimming, it was too late. Eleanor's breath caught. I'm sorry. Everyone's sorry. No one talks about it. We all pretend it was a tragic accident, as if Robert simply decided to drown on a lovely summer afternoon. His jaw tightened. But I know the truth. I know I failed him. And I've spent 15 years studying weather patterns that might help predict dangerous conditions, might save someone else's younger brother, might make his death mean something. That's why you do this. The observations, the research. That's why I do everything. He looked away. Guilt is a powerful motivator. Their food arrived, breaking the moment. They ate in silence for several minutes. Eleanor watched the Duke methodically work through his plate. He ate the way he observed weather, with complete focus and attention to detail. Your father felt guilty too, he said finally, about something specific. That's why he documented everything so carefully. He was trying to find the pattern, trying to understand what went wrong. Eleanor's throat tightened. How do you know? Because that's what I do. And his records read like someone trying to solve a puzzle, trying to find the variable he missed, the treatment he should have prescribed, the symptom he should have seen. The Duke looked at her. What happened? What was he trying to fix? She shouldn't tell him. Shouldn't trust him with the truth that could destroy what remained of her father's legacy, but he'd already trusted her with his own guilt. His own ghost. "Children," she whispered. 7 children died within 2 weeks 3 years ago, all under 10 years old, all with similar symptoms: fever, convulsions, respiratory failure. My father treated every one of them, and every one of them died. The Duke's expression sharpened. That's when Lady Cordelia's nephew died. Christopher was the last one. The others were from working families, coal miners' children, farmers' children, no one with social influence, no one who could demand investigations or answers. Her voice shook. But when Christopher died, when a lady's nephew died receiving the same treatment as common children, suddenly people wanted answers. What was the treatment? A standard fever remedy. Willow bark tincture, prepared the same way my father had prepared it for 20 years, the same treatment he'd used successfully on hundreds of other patients. Eleanor's hands were trembling. But something was wrong with that batch. Something was contaminated or improperly mixed. And those 7 children paid the price. Did your father know it was contaminated? Not until the 7th child died. By then he'd destroyed the remaining tincture, but he analyzed what residue remained. He found traces of something. He was never certain what, but enough to know that he'd unknowingly poisoned 7 innocent children. The Duke was quiet for a long moment. That would destroy anyone. It destroyed him. He spent 2 years trying to trace the contamination, trying to understand how it happened. He stopped sleeping, stopped eating properly, started drinking laudanum for the nightmares. Eleanor's voice broke. And then one morning, I found him in his study, empty bottle beside him, no note except... She stopped. Except what? Forgive me. Over and over, until his handwriting failed. And you burned it. She looked at him sharply. How? Because if anyone else had seen it, they would have known it was suicide, which would have confirmed guilt in everyone's eyes. You protected him the only way you could. The Duke's expression was unreadable. But Lady Cordelia still blames you. She needs someone to blame. Her nephew died and someone should pay. Eleanor's laugh was bitter, and I inherited everything. The clinic, the records, the money from selling medications. In her mind, I profited from those deaths. Did you? I inherited debt. The medications barely covered costs. The clinic generates no income without a licensed physician, and the medical board has frozen everything pending their investigation. She met his eyes. I didn't kill my father for money, Your Grace. I watched him die slowly for 2 years while I was powerless to save him. That's a different kind of guilt. The Duke was silent, studying her face. Then he said something she didn't expect. We need to find out what contaminated the tincture. What? If we can prove it wasn't your father's error, if we can show the contamination came from an external source, we can clear his name. And yours. He leaned forward. Your father documented everything. Those records will show his process, where he sourced ingredients, how he prepared the tincture. If we're thorough enough, we might be able to trace the contamination to its source. It's been 3 years. The evidence is gone. The records aren't gone. The pattern isn't gone. His eyes were bright with the same intensity he brought to storm watching. Your father was trying to solve this puzzle. Let me help you finish what he started. Eleanor felt something crack open in her chest. Hope, painful and dangerous. Why would you do this? Because I understand guilt. Because I believe your father deserves better than being remembered as a drunk who killed children. And because... He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. Because you deserve better than spending the rest of your life hiding from accusations you don't deserve. You barely know me. I know you survived a public attack without fainting. I know you kept your eyes open during a storm even though your body was screaming at you to close them. I know you've been protecting your father's memory at the cost of your own reputation. He smiled slightly. That's enough to know you're worth defending. The words settled between them like a promise. Mrs. Davies brought more tea, clearly trying to eavesdrop but too polite to ask direct questions. After she left, Eleanor said quietly, If we do this, if we investigate, we might find something worse. We might find evidence that confirms his guilt. Then we'll know the truth. Isn't that better than doubt? Eleanor thought about the past 3 years, the whispers, the accusations, the crushing weight of uncertainty. "Yes," she said finally. "Yes, it is." "Good." The Duke pulled out his notebook. "We start with the records from that month. Every patient your father treated, every medication he prepared, every ingredient he used. We build a timeline and we find the break in the pattern. This could take weeks. Months, probably." He looked up. "Are you willing?" Eleanor thought about her father's last note, about 7 children who deserved answers, about Lady Cordelia's righteous fury and her own crushing guilt, about the Duke's offer to help carry the weight. "Yes," she said. "I'm willing." They worked until sunset, organizing records into chronological order. The Duke's attention to detail was extraordinary. He noticed patterns Eleanor had missed, connections she hadn't considered. When a particularly heavy rain began, he insisted they move to the window to observe it. "Look," he said, pointing at the way water sheeted off the clinic's roof. "See how it's falling straight down? No wind shear. That means the storm system is stable. It'll rain steady but gentle for several hours." "How do you know?" "Experience? Observation? 12 years of watching storms and documenting patterns." He glanced at her. "The same way your father learned to recognize symptoms. Pattern recognition is pattern recognition, whether you're studying weather or illness. You think they're connected? I think everything is connected if you look closely enough." He turned from the window. "I should go. We've done enough for today." But he didn't move. Instead, he stood there in the fading light, rain drumming steadily outside, looking at her with that same analytical attention he gave to clouds. "What?" Eleanor said finally. "You're different than I expected." "Different how?" "Stronger, smarter, more cynical than you pretend to be in public." He smiled slightly. "I like cynicism, it's honest. Most people prefer optimism. Most people are lying to themselves." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Same time tomorrow?" "Yes." "Good." He pulled on his coat. "Bring the records from April, and Miss Kirby." "Yes?" "Thank you for trusting me with the truth." He left before she could respond, striding out into the rain without a second thought. Eleanor watched him go, then turned back to the stacks of her father's records, the weight of them suddenly feeling less like burden and more like mission. She had spent 3 years running from the truth. Maybe it was time to run toward it instead. They fell into a pattern over the next 2 weeks. The Duke would arrive each morning at 10, bringing coffee and fresh bread from the inn. They would work through her father's records until noon, then break for lunch and weather observations. If there was a storm, they would document it together. Eleanor timing strikes while the Duke measured wind speed and direction with instruments he'd designed himself. In the afternoons, they would return to the records, building a timeline of the 7 deaths. Slowly, painfully, a picture emerged. All 7 children had received the same willow bark tincture. All had been treated within a 10-day period, and all had developed symptoms within hours of treatment. "It wasn't gradual poisoning," the Duke said one afternoon, staring at the timeline they'd pinned to the wall. "It was acute, single exposure, which means the contamination was in that specific batch. Yes, now we need to trace where your father sourced his ingredients that month." He turned to Eleanor. "Did he grow his own willow bark?" "No. He purchased it from an apothecary in London, Thornbury's, on Cheapside. They supplied most of the rural physicians in this region." "Did he purchase anything else that month?" Eleanor consulted the ledgers. "Just the bark. He made everything else from plants he grew himself." "Then we need to know if other physicians received contaminated supplies from Thornbury's." The Duke started making notes. "I'll send inquiries to every rural practice within 50 miles. If there were other cases of sudden fever deaths in children around that time, we'll find them. And if there weren't, then the contamination was targeted. Which means someone wanted those children dead." He looked at her. "Or wanted to destroy your father's reputation." The possibility hung in the air like smoke. Eleanor's stomach turned. "That's insane." "Possibly, but we can't rule it out until we have more information." He set his pen down. "Miss Kirby, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest." "All right. Did your father have enemies? Anyone who might have wanted to harm him professionally?" Eleanor thought about it. Her father had been respected, if not wealthy. He'd treated everyone regardless of ability to pay, which had made him beloved among working families, but occasionally frustrated wealthier patients who felt their status should grant them priority. There was one physician, she said slowly, Dr. Marcus Pettigrew. He practiced in the next village, and he'd been trying to establish a practice here for years. My father's presence blocked him. Patients trusted my father, and Dr. Pettigrew couldn't compete. What happened to this Dr. Pettigrew? He left the area about 6 months after my father died. I heard he set up a new practice in Bath. The Duke's expression sharpened. Convenient timing. You think he contaminated the tincture? I think it's worth investigating. He started gathering papers. I'm going to Bath tomorrow. I'll speak with Dr. Pettigrew, see what he remembers about that time. I'm coming with you. Miss Kirby, it's my father's reputation, my investigation. I'm coming. She met his eyes. Unless you're embarrassed to be seen traveling with me. I'm never embarrassed by things that make other people uncomfortable, he smiled. Fine. We leave at dawn. Bring practical clothes. Bath is fashionable, and I intend to horrify everyone by bringing a woman who doesn't care about fashion. Eleanor laughed. Over the past 2 weeks, she'd learned that the Duke's sense of humor was his armor, the way he kept people at a distance while appearing completely open. But occasionally, when he forgot to maintain the performance, she saw glimpses of something deeper. Loneliness, determination, a fierce intelligence that had nowhere to direct itself except clouds and patterns. She was beginning to understand why he'd offered to help her, not just because he believed in justice or science, but because he too knew what it meant to carry guilt that couldn't be set down. Your Grace, she said as he prepared to leave, may I ask you something personal? You may ask, I may not answer. Your brother, Robert. Do you ever stop feeling responsible? He was quiet for a long moment. No, but I've learned to make the guilt useful, to let it drive me towards something productive instead of simply destroying me. He looked at her directly. Your father didn't learn that. He let the guilt consume him. Don't make the same mistake. I don't know how to make it useful. You're already doing it. You're here fighting to clear his name, fighting to understand what happened. That's not running from guilt. That's transforming it. He moved toward the door, then paused. Tomorrow. Dawn. Don't be late. The weather will turn by afternoon, and I want to be back before the roads become impassable. How do you know the weather will turn? He grinned. Because I'm very good at what I do, Miss Kirby. Don't doubt me. She didn't. They left before sunrise, the Duke driving the carriage himself instead of bringing a driver. Less witnesses to our scandalous behavior, he said cheerfully. Also, I drive faster than my coachman. The journey to Bath took 6 hours. They talked about everything and nothing, weather patterns and medical theories, books they'd read, places they'd travelled. The Duke had spent 2 years in Scotland studying storm patterns over the Highlands. Eleanor had never left Somerset except once to visit London as a child. You should travel, he said, once this is resolved. Go somewhere that doesn't know your history. And do what? Whatever interests you. Study medicine formally. Write about your father's work. Throw rocks at Lady Cordelia's window. He glanced at her. You're 27 and unattached. The world is full of possibilities. The world is full of restrictions for women without fortune or family. Then find ways around the restrictions. I did. You're a duke. I'm a duke who spends his time standing in storms and talking to clouds. Society thinks I'm insane. I've simply decided their opinion doesn't matter. He smiled. You could do the same. You make it sound easy. It's not easy, it's just possible. There's a difference. They reached Bath by early afternoon. The city was as fashionable as promised. Elegant buildings, well-dressed crowds, an air of refined entertainment that made Eleanor feel immediately out of place. The Duke noticed her discomfort. Ignore them, they're all performing for each other. No one here is actually happy. They're just pretending more convincingly. Doctor. Pettigrew's practice was in a respectable part of town, marked by a discreet brass plaque. The Duke knocked with authority, and a nervous young assistant answered. The Duke of Carlisle to see Dr. Pettigrew. Tell him it's about a medical matter from Somerset. The assistant's eyes widened. Of course, Your Grace. Please, come in. They were shown to a receiving room decorated in expensive but tasteless furniture. Eleanor sat stiffly, suddenly aware of how out of place they both looked. The Duke with his ink-stained fingers and windswept hair, herself in practical travelling clothes that hadn't been fashionable even when new. Dr. Pettigrew entered with a flourish. He was in his 50s, well-fed, with the confident bearing of someone who'd finally achieved success after years of struggle. "Your Grace, what an unexpected honour." His eyes flicked to Eleanor, lingering with distaste. "And Miss South Kirby," the Duke said flatly. "Dr. Kirby's daughter. We're investigating the contaminated medications that killed 7 children 3 years ago." The colour drained from Pettigrew's face. I don't know what you're—" "Don't insult my intelligence." The Duke's voice was cold, all humour gone. "You practiced near Dr. Kirby's clinic. You had motive to damage his reputation, and you left the area immediately after his death. Curious timing." "I left because there was no opportunity for me there. Dr. Kirby had a monopoly on competent treatment, yes, which must have been frustrating." The Duke leaned forward. "Tell me, Dr. Pettigrew, did you purchase supplies from Thornbury's apothecary?" "Everyone purchased from Thornbury's." "Did you have access to Dr. Kirby's clinic?" Occasionally, yes, we would consult on difficult cases." "Did you ever handle his medications?" Pettigrew's jaw clenched. "Your Grace, I understand you're concerned, but I had nothing to do with those children's deaths. Dr. Kirby's own negligence was non-existent." Eleanor spoke for the first time, her voice steady. "My father was meticulous. Those medications were contaminated deliberately, and you're the only person with motive." "This is slander. I'll sue—" "Please do," the Duke said pleasantly. "I'd love to depose you under oath. Let's discuss your financial troubles 3 years ago. Your gambling debts. The loans you took from less than reputable sources. The way a successful scandal would have driven patients away from Dr. Kirby and toward your practice." Pettigrew stood abruptly. "Get out, both of you, before I call the constable." "Excellent idea." The Duke stood as well. "Let's involve law enforcement. I'm sure they'd be fascinated by these irregularities in your practice, the treatments you're claiming credit for, the questionable medications you're prescribing." He pulled a paper from his coat. "I took the liberty of having my people investigate before we came. Would you like to see what they found?" The blood drained from Pettigrew's face completely. "What do you want?" "The truth. Who contaminated Dr. Kirby's tincture? Was it you, or did someone pay you to do it?" For a long moment Pettigrew said nothing. Then he collapsed back into his chair, suddenly looking much older. "It wasn't supposed to kill them," he whispered. Eleanor felt the room tilt. "What?" "It was just supposed to make them sick, not kill them. Just sick enough that Dr. Kirby's reputation would be questioned. Just enough to drive some patients to my practice instead." His voice broke. "I didn't mean for them to die. I swear I didn't mean—" "But they did die." The Duke's voice was ice. 7 children died because you wanted to steal patients from a better physician. I never meant—" Pettigrew looked at Eleanor, his eyes pleading. "You have to believe me. I never meant for it to go that far. I just wanted— You wanted what belonged to someone else, and you were willing to hurt children to get it." Eleanor's voice shook with rage. "You destroyed my father. You destroyed those families. And for what? A practice? Money? I was desperate. I had debts. Everyone has debts. Not everyone murders children to pay them." The Duke handed Pettigrew a piece of paper. "You're going to write a full confession, every detail, how you accessed Dr. Kirby's clinic, how you contaminated the tincture, how much you added, everything. And if I refuse, then I'll destroy you systematically. I'll inform the medical board. I'll tell every patient you've treated in Bath. I'll make certain your name becomes synonymous with incompetence and murder." The Duke leaned close. "Or you can confess, face justice, and perhaps salvage some shred of dignity. Your choice." Pettigrew wrote the confession with shaking hands. It took 20 minutes. When he finished, the Duke read it carefully, then folded it into his coat pocket. "One more thing," Eleanor said quietly. "Why belladonna? Why something so poisonous?" "I didn't use belladonna. I used something else. Something I thought would just cause fever. Pettigrew wouldn't meet her eyes. I don't know what went wrong, why it was so toxic. I swear I didn't. You don't get to claim innocence. Eleanor's voice was steady, despite the fury shaking through her. You don't get to say you didn't mean it. You contaminated medications given to children. Whatever your intention, you're a murderer. They left Pettigrew sitting in his expensive room, confession written, future destroyed. The Duke said nothing until they were back in the carriage. Then he looked at Eleanor with something like pride. Well done. You were magnificent. Eleanor didn't feel magnificent. She felt sick. He killed them. He killed 7 children and my father, and he's just sitting there, writing a confession like it's a minor inconvenience. He'll hang for it, or be transported. The legal system doesn't look kindly on physicians who murder children. The Duke took her hand. You found the truth. That's what you needed. Is it? Eleanor's voice broke. Because now I know my father died, believing he'd killed those children himself. He never knew someone had deliberately... She couldn't finish. The Duke pulled her against him, and she let herself break down completely, sobbing against his coat while he held her, saying nothing, just letting her grieve. When she finally pulled back, exhausted, he handed her a handkerchief. We'll take this confession to the magistrate. He'll issue a warrant. Pettigrew will be arrested within days. And then everyone will know the truth. Yes, including Lady Cordelia. He paused. Are you ready for that? Eleanor thought about the past 3 years. The whispers, the accusations, the weight of protecting a reputation while destroying her own. Yes, she said finally. I'm ready. The weather turned as they left Bath, exactly as the Duke had predicted. Heavy clouds rolled in, darkening the afternoon to premature twilight. By the time they were halfway home, rain was falling in sheets. The Duke pulled the carriage under a grove of trees, waiting for the worst to pass. We'll be late, he said, but attempting the roads in this weather would be suicide. They sat in the shelter of the carriage, rain drumming overhead. Eleanor was exhausted, emotionally wrung out, but also strangely calm. For 3 years, she'd carried the weight of not knowing. Now she knew. And knowing, however painful, was better than doubt. Your Grace, she said quietly, thank you for believing me, for helping me find the truth. Tristan. She blinked. What? My name is Tristan. If we're going to continue working together, and I assume we are given that we've barely begun the weather correlation study, you should probably call me by my name. That's not proper. Nothing about our association is proper. We travel alone together. We spend hours unsupervised in your father's clinic. We stand in storms getting soaked. He smiled slightly. I think propriety abandoned us somewhere around Lady Pembroke's garden party. Eleanor found herself smiling despite everything. Tristan then, though only in private. Naturally, in public I'm still Your Grace, you eccentric lunatic. He watched the rain with obvious pleasure. Look at the way it's falling. Vertical sheets. That means the wind has died completely. The storm is passing through quickly. We'll be able to move in 20 minutes. You really do love this. I love understanding patterns. Weather is just the most obvious pattern, but I see them everywhere. In your father's medical records, in the way people move through social spaces, in the progression of storms. He looked at her. In you. What pattern do you see in me? Survival. Adaptation. You protect yourself by closing your eyes when threatened, but you're learning to keep them open. You're rewiring yourself. He reached out, brushing rain from her cheek with his thumb. It's remarkable. The touch was brief, casual, but it sent heat through Eleanor's entire body. She became suddenly intensely aware of how close they were in the small carriage, how alone, how improper this entire situation was. Tristan, I know. He withdrew his hand. I'm sorry. That was inappropriate. No, it wasn't. Eleanor's heart was racing. It was just too much, too soon, too complicated, all of those things. She met his eyes, but not unwelcome. Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the armor of humor and detachment he usually wore. Eleanor, we need to be clear about what's happening here. What is happening? I'm developing feelings I shouldn't have. For a woman I'm supposed to be helping professionally, a woman who's vulnerable and trusting me with her family's reputation. He looked away. It's a terrible abuse of power, and I should stop immediately. What if I'm developing the same feelings? Then we're both idiots. But he smiled when he said it. Eleanor, I'm not good at this, at caring about people. I'm good at clouds and patterns and saying inappropriate things at parties. I'm not. You're better at caring than you think. You've spent 2 weeks helping me investigate my father's death. You've treated his work with respect when everyone else dismissed it. You've made me feel seen in a way I haven't felt since before he died. She reached for his hand. That's not nothing. His fingers closed around hers. If we do this, if we pursue this, it will make everything more complicated. The scandal will be worse. Lady Cordelia's attacks will intensify. Society will say, I'm taking advantage of you, or you're seducing me for my influence. Let them say it. You taught me that other people's opinions don't matter. I said my opinion of other people's opinions doesn't matter. Yours might. He squeezed her hand. I don't want you to suffer more because of me. I'm already suffering. At least this way I'd be suffering with someone who makes me laugh. She smiled. And who can predict weather with disturbing accuracy. It's not disturbing. It's scientific. It's both. The rain was easing. Tristan watched it for a moment, then turned back to her. All right, but we do this carefully, slowly. We finish the investigation first. Clear your father's name. Deal with Pettigrew's arrest. Then, if you still want this, we see what happens. And if Lady Cordelia attacks again, then I'll defend you again. More publicly this time. His thumb traced small circles on her palm. But Eleanor, you need to understand what you're risking. Associating with me won't make your life easier. I don't want easier, I want honest. She looked at their joined hands. I want someone who sees me. Not the scandal, not the ruined reputation. Just me. I do see you. Every stubborn, brilliant, determined part of you. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a brief kiss to her knuckles, which is why I'm terrified of hurting you. You won't. I might. I'm not good at this, Eleanor. At letting people close. At being vulnerable. I've spent 15 years keeping everyone at a distance. Then we'll learn together. She smiled. Slowly, carefully, with scientific method and careful observation. He laughed, some of the tension easing from his shoulders. You're mocking me? I'm speaking your language. The rain had stopped. Tristan released her hand reluctantly and returned to the driver's seat. As they continued toward home, Eleanor watched the clouds breaking apart, revealing patches of evening sky. She'd set out this morning looking for truth about her father's death. She'd found it. Painful, devastating truth. But she'd also found something else, something she hadn't been looking for and didn't know she needed. She'd found someone who made her want to keep her eyes open, even when it hurt, even when it was terrifying, even when every instinct screamed to shut out the world and hide. She wanted to see what happened next. The next 3 weeks moved with brutal efficiency. The Duke, Tristan, in private, took Pettigrew's confession to the magistrate. A warrant was issued. Pettigrew was arrested in Bath and brought back to Somerset to face trial. The scandal was immediate and explosive. Lady Cordelia appeared at Eleanor's clinic 2 days after Pettigrew's arrest, her face pale with shock. Is it true? Did Dr. Pettigrew confess? Eleanor faced her across the same examination table where her father had treated Christopher 3 years ago. Yes, he confessed to contaminating my father's medication, to deliberately poisoning those children to damage my father's reputation. Cordelia swayed. But why? Why would he? Because he wanted patience, money, success. Eleanor's voice was steady. My father didn't kill your nephew, Lady Cordelia. Dr. Pettigrew did, and my father spent 2 years destroying himself with guilt over something he didn't do. Cordelia sank into a chair. I've been blaming you, attacking you publicly, telling everyone you were a murderer. Her voice broke. Oh no, what have I done? You were grieving. You needed someone to blame. Eleanor sat across from her. I understand that. But your grief doesn't excuse destroying my life. No, it doesn't. Cordelia looked up, tears streaming down her face. Miss Kirby, I don't know how to. I don't want your apology. The words came out harder than Eleanor intended. I want you to stop. Stop spreading rumors. Stop attacking me at parties. Stop trying to convince the medical board to revoke my father's license posthumously. I will. I swear I will. Cordelia's hands trembled. Is there anything I can do? Any way to make amends? Eleanor thought about it. About 3 years of isolation and accusation. About her father's suicide. About 7 dead children and a murderer who'd hidden behind professional courtesy. Yes, she said finally. You can tell the truth, publicly. You can tell everyone that my father was innocent, that he was a skilled physician who was deliberately sabotaged by a jealous colleague. I will, at every social event, to everyone who'll listen. Cordelia stood, seeming to age years in moments. Miss Kirby, I cannot undo the harm I've caused, but I swear on Christopher's memory that I will spend the rest of my life making it right. After Cordelia left, Eleanor sat alone in the clinic, surrounded by her father's instruments and records. She'd wanted this moment for 3 years, vindication, truth, justice, but now that it had arrived, she felt strangely empty. Her father was still dead, the children were still dead, and no amount of truth could bring them back. Tristan found her there an hour later, staring at nothing. Eleanor. He sat beside her. The magistrate wants you to testify at Pettigrew's trial. Are you prepared for that? I don't know. She looked at him. Everyone will know. Every detail. Every horrible detail. Yes, but they'll also know your father was innocent. That you were innocent. That Lady Cordelia was wrong. He took her hand. You'll finally be free of this. Will I? Or will I just be the woman whose father was poisoned instead of the woman who poisoned her father? Eleanor's laugh was bitter. Either way, I'm defined by tragedy. Then define yourself differently. The tragedy happened. You can't change that, but you can choose what you do next. What should I do next? Whatever you want. Study medicine, travel, write about your father's work. He paused. Stand in storms with an eccentric duke who's falling in love with you. Eleanor's breath caught. Tristan, I know it's too soon, too complicated. Too many reasons why this is a terrible idea. He smiled, but his eyes were serious. But I'm saying it anyway because you should know. You should know that someone sees you as more than tragedy, as more than scandal, as brilliant and strong and worth loving. You barely know me. I know you kept your eyes open during a storm even though you were terrified. I know you protected your father's memory at terrible cost. I know you faced down Pettigrew with more courage than most soldiers show in battle. He cupped her face gently. I know enough. Eleanor felt tears burning behind her eyes. I don't know how to do this. How to let someone care. How to trust that you won't leave when things get difficult. I won't leave. I'm not particularly good at most things, but I'm excellent at stubbornness. He brushed away a tear with his thumb. I spent 15 years blaming myself for Robert's death. 15 years keeping everyone at a distance because caring hurt too much. And then I met you and I realized... He stopped. Realized what? That maybe caring is supposed to hurt. That maybe it's worth the risk. He rested his forehead against hers. Stay. Keep your eyes open. Let me try to deserve you. Eleanor closed her eyes. Not from fear this time, but from overwhelming emotion. I'm terrified. So am I. His breath was warm against her face. But I'd rather be terrified with you than safe alone. She kissed him then, soft and tentative and desperate all at once. He responded immediately, one hand tangling in her hair, while the other pulled her closer. The kiss deepened, became more urgent, and Eleanor felt years of loneliness and grief cracking open into something bright and fragile and new. When the kiss ended, they were both breathless. Tristan laughed shakily. That was worth the scandal? Worth everything. He pressed his forehead to hers again. Eleanor, I need you to understand what we're doing. If we continue this, if we make this public, the gossip will be vicious. They'll say you seduced me for my protection, that I'm taking advantage of your vulnerability, that we're both mad. Let them. You say that now, I mean it. She pulled back to look at him directly. I've spent 3 years caring what people think, protecting my reputation, hiding from scandal, and it's made me miserable. I'd rather be scandalous and happy than proper and alone. You're certain? No, but I'm willing to try. She smiled, slowly, carefully, with scientific observation. He laughed and kissed her again, slower this time, deeper. When storm clouds gathered outside the window, they watched together. Eleanor timing the lightning while Tristan documented wind patterns, working together, learning together, choosing each other despite every reason not to. Pettigrew's trial lasted 4 days. Eleanor testified on the 3rd day, describing her father's meticulous practices, the timeline of deaths, the devastating aftermath. Tristan sat in the gallery, his presence a steadying weight, and every time Eleanor felt her composure slipping, she would look at him and remember. Stay present, keep your eyes open, you're not alone. The jury deliberated for less than an hour, guilty on all counts. Pettigrew would hang. Eleanor felt no satisfaction, just exhausted relief that it was over. Lady Cordelia testified as well, publicly recanting every accusation she'd made against Eleanor and her father. The newspapers ran stories about the terrible injustice and the tragic victims of professional jealousy. Suddenly, Eleanor was no longer a scandal. She was a sympathetic figure, a wronged daughter, a woman who'd suffered nobly while fighting for truth. She hated it, hated being reduced to narrative, hated having her private grief dissected in public. They'll forget soon enough, Tristan said as they walked through his estate gardens a week after the trial. Some other scandal will emerge, and you'll be yesterday's news. Is that supposed to be comforting? It's supposed to be realistic. He squeezed her hand. But while you're still interesting, we should probably discuss our future. Eleanor's heart jumped. Our future? Don't look so panicked. I'm not proposing. Not yet, anyway. He smiled at her expression. But we need to make decisions. About your father's clinic. About the research we're conducting, about whether you want to be publicly associated with me or keep our relationship private. What do you want? I want you to be happy and safe and free from scandal if that's what you prefer. He stopped walking, turning to face her. But if I'm being honest, which seems like a good policy in relationships, I want everyone to know you're mine. I want to attend events with you on my arm. I want to stand in storms with you while society whispers about how mad we both are. He touched her face. I want to choose you publicly, Eleanor, but only if you want that too. Eleanor thought about it, about 3 years of hiding, about the freedom she'd felt standing in storms with him, about the way he made her feel seen and known and valued. I want that too, she said quietly, but I'm still afraid. Of what? That you'll realize I'm not worth the scandal. That you'll get bored. That you'll... She stopped, but he understood. That I'll leave, like your father left. His voice was gentle. Eleanor, I can't promise I'll never hurt you. I can't promise I'll always know the right thing to say or do, but I can promise I won't abandon you. Not when things get difficult, not when society turns on us, not ever. How can you be so certain? Because I spent 15 years alone. I know exactly how miserable it is, and I know that being with you, even when it's complicated and scary and difficult, is infinitely better than being alone. He kissed her forehead. You're worth fighting for, worth the scandal, worth everything. Thunder rumbled in the distance. They both looked up automatically, reading the clouds. Storm coming, Eleanor said. Big one. We should head inside. But neither of them moved. They stood together in the garden as the first drops began to fall, watching the sky darken, feeling the wind pick up. Race you to the summer house, Tristan said suddenly, grinning like a child. They ran together through the rain, laughing, soaked within seconds. The summer house was small and sheltered, its windows rattling with wind. They collapsed inside, breathless and dripping. That was idiotic, Eleanor gasped. That was perfect. Tristan was watching her, his expression soft. You're perfect. I'm soaking wet and probably getting ill. Still perfect. He pulled her close and she went willingly, pressing against his warmth. Eleanor, I need to tell you something. What? I love you. Completely. Possibly obsessively. In a way that's probably unhealthy but feels inevitable. He smiled against her hair. I needed you to know that, before everything gets complicated again, before society starts gossiping. I needed you to know that this, us, it's real for me. Eleanor's throat tightened. It's real for me too, terrifyingly real. Good. Fear means it matters. They stood together while the storm raged outside, two damaged people learning how to be whole together, learning how to keep their eyes open even when it hurt, learning how to choose each other. The scandal broke 3 weeks later, exactly as Tristan had predicted. Someone, Eleanor suspected one of Lady Pembroke's guests, leaked information about the Duke of Carlisle's unseemly relationship with the daughter of a disgraced physician. Never mind that her father had been vindicated. Never mind that Eleanor had done nothing wrong. The story was too good to resist. Wealthy duke, poor woman, scandalous association. The gossip was vicious. Eleanor was called a seductress, an opportunist, a woman using tragedy to snare a title. Tristan was called mad, inappropriate, a man throwing away his reputation for a woman beneath his station. Eleanor wanted to hide, wanted to close her eyes and disappear into the safe darkness where nothing could hurt her. Instead, she kept them open, kept working, kept living. Tristan appeared at her clinic the morning after the scandal broke, carrying coffee and newspapers. Have you read them? He asked. Every awful word. Good. Then you know exactly how predictable society is. He spread the papers across her father's desk. Look, they're all saying the same things. Disgraceful, inappropriate, social suicide. Not a single original thought among them. That's supposed to make me feel better. It's supposed to make you realize their opinions are worthless. They're not actually thinking. They're just repeating the same tired narratives. He looked at her seriously. Eleanor, I need to know if you want me to step back. If this is too much. If you'd rather end our association and rebuild your reputation without me complicating things. Is that what you want? Never. But I want you to be happy more than I want you to be mine. Eleanor thought about the past month. The investigation, the trial, the slowly growing certainty that Tristan saw her, not the scandal, not the tragedy, but her. The real her, complicated and scared and determined. I don't want you to step back, she said firmly. I want you to stay. I want everyone to know we're together. She stopped, suddenly shy. What do you want? You, publicly, scandal and all. She smiled. Let them talk. Let them judge. I choose you anyway. His expression transformed, relief and joy and love all mixed together. You're certain? Completely. Then we do this properly. He pulled a small box from his pocket. I was going to wait. Be sensible. But I've never been particularly good at being sensible. Eleanor's heart stopped. Tristan, marry me. Not because of the scandal, not because society expects it, but because I love you and I want to spend my life standing in storms with you and studying impossible patterns and making each other laugh. He opened the box, revealing a simple gold band set with a single stone, grey like storm clouds. Marry me and let me choose you every single day for the rest of our lives. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. People will say I seduced you, that I trapped you, that you're making a terrible mistake. People are idiots, we've established this. He smiled. Say yes, Eleanor. Keep your eyes open and say yes. She looked at him. This brilliant, odd, wonderful man who'd defended her publicly, believed her completely and loved her anyway. Who'd helped her find truth even when it hurt. Who made her want to be brave. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a kiss that felt like a promise. Like choosing. Like freedom. When they finally separated, Eleanor was laughing and crying simultaneously. We're going to scandalize everyone. Excellent. I've always wanted to be properly scandalous instead of just mildly eccentric. He wiped her tears gently. Are you ready for what comes next? What comes next? We attend Lady Ashworth's ball tomorrow night. Together. As an engaged couple. And we let everyone see exactly how little we care about their opinions. Eleanor felt the familiar tightness in her chest, the urge to hide, to close her eyes, to make herself small and invisible. But she fought it, breathed through it. looked at Tristan's steady gaze and remembered. "You're not alone. Stay present. Keep your eyes open." "I'm ready," she said. And she meant it. Lady Ashworth's ball was the social event of the season, every important family in attendance, every gossip columnist taking notes. Eleanor felt every eye on them as they entered together, Tristan's hand steady under hers. The whispers started immediately, shocked faces, disapproving stares, a few sympathetic smiles from younger guests who found the scandal romantic. Lady Cordelia Ashworth stood near the refreshment table. When she saw them, she froze, then deliberately crossed the room to stand beside Eleanor. "Miss Kirby," she said clearly, loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "How lovely to see you. And your Grace, congratulations on your engagement. Miss Kirby is a remarkable woman. You're very fortunate." The room went silent. Lady Cordelia, who'd spent 3 years attacking Eleanor publicly, was now defending her, supporting her, choosing her. "Thank you, Lady Cordelia," Eleanor said quietly. Cordelia smiled, sad but genuine. "I hope you'll both be very happy. You deserve it." She squeezed Eleanor's hand briefly, then moved away, leaving a wake of stunned whispers. The evening continued. Some guests remained cold, but others approached with cautious congratulations. Eleanor danced with Tristan, feeling his solid warmth, his steady presence. When she started to feel overwhelmed, he would lean close and whisper observations about the weather, about the absurd decorations, about how uncomfortable everyone looked in their formal clothes, making her laugh, keeping her present. They were standing near the terrace doors, taking a break from dancing, when Lady Pembroke approached with a young woman Eleanor didn't recognize. "Miss Kirby, this is Lady Margaret Crawford. Her mother is quite ill, and their regular physician is in London. I thought perhaps—" "I'm not a licensed physician," Eleanor said carefully, "but you know as much as any physician from what I hear." Lady Margaret looked desperate. "My mother's symptoms don't match anything our doctor described before he left. She's in terrible pain and I don't know how to help her." Eleanor glanced at Tristan. He nodded encouragingly. "All right," Eleanor said. "Describe her symptoms." She spent 20 minutes discussing Lady Margaret's mother's condition, asking detailed questions, finally recognizing a pattern from her father's records. "It sounds like kidney stones, painful but treatable. I can prepare something for the pain and recommend a specialist in London who can remove them if necessary." Lady Margaret's relief was palpable. "Thank you. Thank you so much. What do I owe you?" "Nothing. But if the treatment works, tell people where you got it." Eleanor smiled slightly. "I'm trying to rebuild my father's reputation, and mine." Word spread through the ball. The Duke of Carlisle's scandalous fiancée had just diagnosed an illness that had stumped other physicians. By the end of the evening, 3 more people had approached with medical questions. Eleanor answered what she could, referred others to specialists, and felt something shift. She wasn't just the woman caught in scandal. She was useful, skilled, valuable in her own right. As they left the ball, Tristan squeezed her hand. "You were magnificent tonight. I was terrified. You kept your eyes open anyway. That's what makes it magnificent." He helped her into the carriage. "And you helped those people. Did you see their faces when you diagnosed Lady Margaret's mother? They looked at you with respect, Eleanor. Not pity, not scandal. Respect." Eleanor leaned against him, exhausted but strangely happy. "Thank you for making me come tonight. Thank you for trusting me." He kissed the top of her head. "I have one more thing to show you, if you're not too tired." "What thing?" "A surprise. Trust me?" She did. They drove for 20 minutes, leaving the town behind. The carriage stopped at the top of a hill Eleanor had never visited before. Tristan helped her out, then led her to the edge, where the view opened across miles of countryside. "Look up," he said. Eleanor looked. The sky was clear for the first time in days. Stars scattered across black like silver dust. She could see the Milky Way, could see constellations her father had taught her to identify as a child. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It's perspective." Tristan stood behind her, arms around her waist. "We spend so much time looking down, at gossip, at scandal, at people's small opinions. But if you look up, you remember how vast everything is, How small those opinions are in comparison. Eleanor leaned back against him. Is this what you do when society becomes too much? Come here and look at stars. Every time, it reminds me that people are temporary. Their judgments are temporary. But the universe, patterns, truth, actual significance, that's eternal. He rested his chin on her shoulder. You're significant, Eleanor. Not because of scandal or tragedy or who you're marrying, but because you choose truth over comfort. Because you fight for what matters. Because you keep your eyes open even when it would be easier to hide. Eleanor felt tears threatening again. How do you always know what to say? I don't. Most of the time I say completely inappropriate things and make people uncomfortable. He turned her to face him, but with you, I just say what's true. And hope it's enough. It's more than enough. You're more than enough. She touched his face. I love you. I don't think I've said that clearly enough, but I do, completely, possibly obsessively, in a way that's probably unhealthy but feels inevitable. He laughed, recognizing his own words. We're a matching set of unhealthy obsessions. Perfect? They kissed under the stars, surrounded by countryside and silence and the vast indifference of the universe. And Eleanor thought, this is what it means to be chosen. Not protected from difficulty, but accompanied through it. Not saved, but seen. Thunder rumbled in the distance, another storm approaching, inevitable as breathing. Tristan noticed her listening. We should head back before... No. Eleanor gripped his hand. Stay, just for a few minutes. I want to watch it come. They stood together on the hilltop as the storm rolled in. Clouds covering stars, wind picking up, first drops of rain beginning to fall. And Eleanor didn't close her eyes. Didn't hide. She watched the lightning split the sky, felt the rain soak through her dress, heard Tristan counting seconds beside her. When the storm was directly overhead, he turned to her, rain streaming down his face. Are you afraid? Terrified, she admitted. But not of the storm. Of what? Of how happy I am. Of losing this. Of waking up and finding it was all impossible. Her voice shook. Of closing my eyes and having you disappear. He pulled her close, speaking directly against her ear so she could hear him over the thunder. Then stay here. Stay with me. Right here, right now, in this moment. Don't look backward at what was lost. Don't look forward at what might go wrong. Just stay present. Eleanor buried her face against his shoulder, feeling his solid warmth, his steady heartbeat, the certainty of him. I'm trying. I know. You're doing beautifully. He held her through the storm, not trying to fix her fear, not dismissing it. Just present. Just steady. Just there. And slowly, Eleanor's panic eased. Her breathing steadied. The fear didn't disappear, but it became manageable, survivable, something she could carry without being crushed by it. They rode home soaked and laughing, and Eleanor thought this is what love feels like. Not protection from storms, but company through them. Not certainty, but willingness to be uncertain together. It was better than she'd imagined. It was everything she needed. They married 6 weeks later in a small ceremony at Carlisle House. No grand ball, no society spectacle. Just close friends, Lady Cordelia, whose attendance sparked its own round of gossip, and Lady Margaret's mother, fully recovered from her kidney stones and deeply grateful. Eleanor wore her mother's dress, altered to fit. Tristan wore formal attire but forgot his cravat, claiming it was too restrictive for proper breathing. The ceremony was brief. The vows were traditional. But when Tristan slipped the ring onto Eleanor's finger, he whispered something only she could hear. Thank you for keeping your eyes open. She smiled through happy tears. Thank you for giving me something worth seeing. They spent their wedding night at the summer house where they'd sheltered during that first storm, watching weather patterns and talking until dawn. It was unconventional. It was perfect. It was them. 2 years later, Eleanor stood in the same garden where Tristan had proposed, watching her husband chase their 1-year-old daughter through autumn leaves. Little Margaret, named for both Lady Margaret Crawford and Tristan's mother, was growing more confident on her feet each day, toddling and laughing as her father pretended to be a fearsome dragon. Eleanor was expecting again. This one would be a boy, if the midwife was correct. They'd already chosen a name, Robert, for the brother Tristan still mourned. a way of keeping memory alive while moving forward. The clinic was thriving. Eleanor had finally obtained formal recognition from the medical board, the first woman in Somerset to be granted a physician's license. Lady Cordelia had testified on her behalf, describing Eleanor's skill and her father's legacy with genuine respect. Patients came from miles around, seeking the Duke's physician who treated everyone equally, and knew patterns no one else could see. Eleanor had published 2 papers on her father's weather correlation research, co-authored with Tristan. The medical community was starting to take the work seriously. Lady Cordelia visited monthly, bringing toys for Margaret and news from society. Their friendship was unlikely but genuine, built on shared grief and mutual understanding of how guilt could transform people. Tristan looked up from dragon duties and caught Eleanor watching. "Come play with us. I'm pregnant. I don't play anymore, I waddle." "Waddling is playing, it's just slower playing." He scooped Margaret up and brought her over, the baby reaching for Eleanor with chubby hands. "Tell Mama she should waddle with dragons." Eleanor took their daughter, feeling the familiar weight and warmth. Margaret had Tristan's amber eyes and Eleanor's stubborn determination. She was going to be magnificent. "I love you," Eleanor said to Tristan. "I know. You tell me every day." He kissed her, gentle and familiar. "I love you too. Every stubborn, brilliant part of you." Thunder rumbled overhead, another storm approaching. Margaret squealed with delight, reaching toward the sky. "She's going to be just like you," Eleanor said. "Obsessed with weather and completely inappropriate timing." "Excellent. The world needs more inappropriate weather enthusiasts." Tristan looked at the darkening sky with professional interest. "This one's going to be spectacular. Want to watch from the summer house? With this belly and a toddler? The scientific observation waits for no one, not even pregnant women and small children." They settled in the summer house as rain began. Margaret on Eleanor's lap, Tristan on her other side, all of them watching the storm together, teaching their daughter what they'd learned, that storms were beautiful, that fear was manageable, that staying present mattered more than staying safe. "Look," Tristan said softly to Margaret, pointing at lightning. "See that? That's electricity in the sky. That's the universe showing off." Margaret didn't understand the words, but she watched with wide eyes, unafraid because her parents weren't afraid. Eleanor held her daughter close, feeling Tristan's hand on her shoulder, watching the storm rage and eventually pass, thinking about all the storms they'd weathered together, all the moments she'd almost closed her eyes and missed. She was so grateful she'd kept them open. "What are you thinking?" Tristan asked. "That I'm happy. Impossibly, improbably happy." She looked at him. "Thank you for finding me in that garden, for defending me, for teaching me it was okay to stay present. Thank you for letting me." He kissed her temple. "Thank you for choosing me back." The storm was passing, leaving the garden wet and clean and renewed. Margaret had fallen asleep against Eleanor's chest, breathing softly. And Eleanor thought about her father, about the guilt he'd carried alone until it destroyed him, about 7 children who died because someone chose ambition over compassion, about all the pain that had led to this moment. The grief didn't disappear, the loss didn't unhappen, but she'd learned to carry it differently, not alone, but shared. Not hiding from the weight, but letting love make it bearable. She'd learned to keep her eyes open, to stay present, to choose connection over safety. And it had given her everything. Thank you for staying through this story, for witnessing Eleanor and Tristan find each other through storms both literal and metaphorical. Their journey reminds us that healing isn't about forgetting pain, but about learning to stay present through it. About finding people who make us want to keep our eyes open, even when closing them feels safer. If their story moved you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What moment resonated most? Would you like to see more stories about imperfect people choosing each other despite scandal and doubt? And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story about love, redemption, and the courage to stay present.